All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mr. Castaneda. So I'm sorry Mr. Fogel's a little bit better looking, so you're stuck with me for this portion of the video. What we're going to talk about right now are the organ systems. And by no means is this a complete checklist of every organ that we have in our body, but these are the ones that we think that it's important that you know early off in the class. And again, for lab portions, all we're going to do is have you identify the organ and what organ system it is and possibly what body cavity it does belong to. When we get into lecture, we'll start to focus a little bit more on the actual function of each body system, but for this purpose right now for our lab, we are only going to be worrying about the actual organ itself. Okay, so if we move down the checklist on page 6 where it says organ systems, first one is our integumentary system. We're going to skip over that right now because there's another unit for lab in which we will get more in depth with the integumentary system, so you will have that. So for right now, we're just going to skip over that and we're going to move on to the skeletal system. Now it says bones, cartilage, and ligaments. For right now, what I want to focus on is just bones. We should know that the skeletal system is made up of bone. So here it is right here on this chart right here. We can see all of the bones that make up our skeleton. And again, our skeleton is just there for protection and structural support of our body. Again, if we want to, we can just real quick mention it. What are ligaments? Ligaments are connective tissue structures that hold bone to bone. And cartilage is found at the ends of our movable bone. That will help provide a nice smooth surface for our bones to move across. And there's other cartilages in the body which we will get into as we move further into class. Muscular system. Now for the purpose of lab right now, when we identify muscles, I mean we could just tag it real quick. Anywhere where you see this orange on our models, this is all muscle. And what you have in your checklist, the name is skeletal muscle. The big key about skeletal muscles are attached to bone. There are other types of muscle in our body, and we will get into those when we get to our tissues. But for right now, if we were to tag a muscle on for a lecture or for a lab test, identify this organ, muscle. What organ system does it belong to? Muscular system. It's really that simple. Do not focus right now on worrying about what the specific muscle is. We are not there yet, but we will get there by the end of the semester. Okay? So that will be the muscular system. The next one is the nervous system. Now again, the nervous system is pretty straightforward. What it consists of our brain, which again right here, our brain, our spinal cord, which let me grab this model right here again. Here is the spinal cord right here. And then when we go to this torso model right here, we can turn that around and we can see the spinal cord running again right through the spinal cavity. So there is the spinal cord. Now the other term that you need to know for structures for the nervous system are nerves. Now again, there are very few places. We got charts and we got models and you can pull those up on APR. But for the most part, if you see a yellow structure running through on a model or a chart, that is usually indicating a nerve. And again, what do the nerves do? The nerves usually travel out to some organ in the body, an electrical signal will come from them, and that will basically activate that organ to do something. So that's the big thing for your nervous system: brain, spinal cord, and nerves. The next organ system is the endocrine system. Endocrine system is quite simply that's where our hormones are produced and released into our body, and it affects our bodies in various ways. So as we go down the checklist, and again, these are not all of the endocrine organs in our body, but these are the highlights that we need you to know for right now. And the only thing that we are going to ask you about are the ones from the checklist. We are not going to add anything extra on you. The first one is the pituitary gland. Now, where we find the pituitary gland is found on the inferior surface of the brain. So we look right here and we see this little P-shaped organ right here, that right there is the pituitary gland. And yes, we will get into all its functionality when we get to the endocrine system for lecture. But that's the pituitary gland. The next one is the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland is found in our neck right here. And what it does is it basically controls our metabolic activities in our body. So here's a giant larynx model. And what we can see this organ right here that runs across right here. That is our thyroid gland. If you want to find that on yourself, actually, you find your Adam's apple right here in your neck and just move inferiorly to it. And the thyroid gland is sitting right in through this region right here. As we keep going down the checklist, as we move on to the adrenal gland, Mr. Fogel has already showed that to you in the earlier video, but the adrenal gland is this organ right here that sits right on top of our kidney. So that's the adrenal gland. As we keep coming down, the next, the pancreas. Again, Mr. Fogel has showed you the pancreas already. But again, the pancreas, again, is found posterior to our stomach. So we have the stomach right here. We flip it over to the posterior surface. And what we see right here, this yellow organ right here, this is the pancreas. And I will leave it up to you. This is another homework assignment. Of course, you will get no points for. But the pancreas is the organ that secretes probably the world's best well-known hormone. Stop and think about what it is. And then the next two will be the testes and the ovaries. At this point in your lives, ladies and gentlemen, we should know what one is which. So when we look at this model right here, this is a male reproductive system model, and we can see the testes right here. Okay, and as we come over here, here is the female reproductive model, and then what we can see is the ovary right in here. And we will revisit those again when we move to the reproductive system. Okay, as we come down the list again, well, what do you know? That's a perfect lead in right into the respiratory system, folks. Maybe I should be better organized. So as we come to this model right here, so again, we can see our testes right here. Penis, and then we have this little gland right here that is found right below the urinary bladder, found inferior to the urinary bladder, and that is the prostate gland. And ladies, you do never have to worry about getting your prostate gland examined. Okay? So again, we do want you to pay attention. Well, how can a testes be part of both, or be part of two systems? Well, when the testes are functioning as an endocrine organ, it's secreting the hormone testosterone. And what does that do? That gives a man the male characteristics. When it's functioning as a reproductive organ, the testes are producing sperm. So now when we move to the female reproductive system, again, there is our ovary right here. And again, when the ovary is functioning as an endocrine organ, it is producing estrogen and progesterone. What does that do? That gives a woman their sexual characteristics, their female qualities, and then it also those hormones also help regulate that little thing that you have every month, ladies, called the menstrual cycle. But when it is functioning as a reproductive organ, the ovary produces the egg cell. And then as we keep moving down the list, the uterus is right here. If pregnancy occurs, the fertilized egg will implant within the wall of the uterus. And then 9 months later, you got a little bundle of joy waiting for you. And then the last structure that we need to know is vagina. The vagina is this passageway to the outside. The cardiovascular system, folks, is very simple. When we look at a chart or a model, we definitely know what the heart looks like. Again, the heart's sitting right there in between the two lungs. And then as we go down, arteries and veins. Those are the blood vessels. So when we look at it for our purposes right now in this class, for the purposes right now, if you see a red blood vessel, that is indicative of an artery, and that's telling us that it's carrying oxygenated blood, versus a blue blood vessel, which will be a vein. And why they're showing that as blue is that it's carrying deoxygenated blood. But that's it. For any model, any chart that you see, a red blood vessel will be an artery, a blue blood vessel will be a vein. And then last but not least, the spleen. And again, Mr. Fogel showed that to you when we were talking about the retroperitoneal organs. But if we come right here,
Fell out.
right here, this organ right here, when we look at it right here, the spleen, that is a part of the our cardiovascular system, excuse me. And again, why is it part of the cardiovascular system? Is it contains a large amount of blood that we use in case of we have a drop in our blood volume. The spleen holds about a pint of blood that can be released out into the system to help maintain blood volume, therefore help maintain blood pressure in our body. Okay, so that is the spleen. Now the next one is the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is basically works hand in hand with our immune system to help keep us healthy. Okay, so again, the main structures when we start looking at the lymphatic system, you can read them: thymus gland, lymphatic vessels. Again, the spleen is part of the lymphatic system as well. What the spleen will do is the spleen can help remove a lot of toxins that can build up in our bloodstream, or any bacteria, viruses, cancerous cells within the spleen. It can be broken, those structures can be broken down. So again, the spleen is part of the lymphatic system as well, and our lymph nodes. So when we come to this model right here, we can see a couple structures right here. So when we're looking, these white structures right here, those are lymphatic vessels. And if we follow them, we can see them lead all to these little like green kidney bean shaped structures. Those are the lymph nodes. And what is traveling through the lymphatic vessels is a fluid called lymph. What that is excess body fluid that accumulates in our body, and the lymphatic system will help take that excess fluid away from the inner spaces of our body and then return it back to the bloodstream. And so what ends up happening as the lymph flows through the lymphatic vessels, that lymph is also cleaned within the lymph nodes to remove any toxins or anything harmful from the lymph that shouldn't be in there. And then the last structure that we need you to know for the lymphatic system is this structure right here, the thymus gland. This is found superior to the heart, and what happens here is some of the cells of our immune system mature in this region, in this gland right here. So again, very important note: thymus gland, thyroid gland. When you have all this terminology coming at you, folks, it gets very confusing. Remember, the thyroid gland is found in the neck just below your Adam's apple. The thymus gland is found just superior to the heart. So again, pay close attention to that, because that is one common error we see quite often in Bio 1007 when we first start off. The next one is the respiratory system. Again, what happens in the respiratory system? Gas exchange. How do we get oxygen in our body? How do we remove carbon dioxide? It's all done through the respiratory system. So the first structures we're going to look at over here, folks, is your nasal cavity. So again, we can see the nose right here, and then inside of it, here's the nasal cavity. And then from there, the nasal cavity will lead to the pharynx, which is basically your throat. Okay, so there's the throat right there. And then from the pharynx, the air will follow through the larynx. And again, the larynx, also referred to sometimes as the Adam's apple, the voice box, whatever. And Mr. Fogel and I needs to make a point right here. Voice box, Adam's apple. While it may help you study, they will not be acceptable terms on a lecture or lab test. So we want you to get the correct anatomical terms down. So the larynx, right here. And then so from the larynx, then the air will move into our trachea. So we will find a trachea model really quick here. So we can come right here. This is not the best, I know, but we can see there's our larynx right here, folks. As we drop down, this structure hidden behind the blood vessels, there is our trachea, and we follow the trachea down, and we can see where the trachea then split into these branches right here. Those branches are called bronchi. Bronchi are the airways that go directly to our lungs. And then last but not least, the lungs themselves. We'll come back to this model right here. We can see there is a lung right here inside the body. If I take that off, here's the lung outside the body. And quite simply put, what is happening within our lungs? Quite simply put, gas exchange. Digestive system. The digestive system, again, we're pretty familiar. We should be pretty straightforward with that. Again, we'll come back to this model right here. Oral cavity is just a fancy term for the mouth, but there is the oral cavity again. And as we come down, we can see the pharynx again, our throat. So yes, the pharynx is part of both the respiratory and digestive system. As food and liquid move through it, it's a digestive organ. As air moves through it, it is solely a respiratory organ. The esophagus. The esophagus is a tube that connects our pharynx with our stomach. So if we come out here and we move this out of the way, again, the pharynx would be up here, our throat. And as we come down here, we can see a bit of the esophagus right here. And then the esophagus leads directly to our stomach. So when we come here,
There's someone else for me.
there we go. So here's a much better view of that. Here's a much better view of the esophagus, the full length of it. We can follow it all the way down, and then we see where it's been cut, but the stomach would be sitting right here. And again, here it is right here. Here is the stomach. So again, we may have a picture of the stomach on the test, folks, and it may be simply put, name this organ and name the organ system to which it belongs, which would be the digestive. Okay, so that is the stomach. As we come down, the pancreas. Again, the pancreas, again, is found on the posterior surface of the stomach. It also functions as a digestive organ. It's just not an endocrine organ. It is also a digestive organ. The next one then is the liver, and this is the large organ that will be sitting on the right-hand side of the abdominal cavity, the liver. We take it out. Here is the liver right here, and then we can see the gallbladder. The gallbladder is this green organ that sits on the inferior surface of the liver. Okay? Then the next two are the small intestine and the large intestine. So again, the intestines will be sitting right here. So if we take this organ up, this is the small intestines right here. So we take that apart, there's the small intestine, and then we leave behind the large intestine. And we put that back together. Now there's one other structure that's listed underneath the digestive system, and that's the appendix. But we do want you to make a note. The appendix is an organ that does not have any digestive function. It's more part of the lymphatic system. So if we can take off the small intestines right here. So what we have is the appendix is right here. It's attached to the large intestine. And then just for general purposes, that's why they're saying it's listed underneath the digestive system. But actually, the appendix is truly a lymphatic organ. Okay, one more organ system to go. Sorry, Mr. Fogel and I haven't given you more information so far, but we're working on that. So the next one, the next structure then, the last organ system is the urinary system. So the first structure would be the kidney. So again, we have our kidney sitting right here. There's the kidney. And now this, when we look at this tube right here that comes from the kidney, that is the ureter. So if we just follow the ureter all the way down, the ureter will eventually lead to this organ right here, which is the urinary bladder. And then finally, the urethra. The urethra is the passageway of urine outside the body. So in a female reproductive system, we can see the urinary bladder from a sagittal section. And then this passageway right here, this is the urethra right here. In the male reproductive system, we can see urinary bladder right here. And as we come right here, then running right through the penis right there, that passageway, that is the urethra. And folks, that is the organ systems. And again, we will get into much more depth on the functionality of the organ systems when we cover those in lecture.